Welcome to 5 and 5 from the One Stop Co-op Shop, where I discuss 5 key elements of a game in about 5 minutes. I'm Michael Kelly, and today I'm looking at one I really should have reviewed quite a while back because it's one of my favorites, Root, and its solo play with the Clockwork expansion. And no disclaimer needed for this one, I bought everything this game has available on my own. So like I said, Root is one of my favorite games, and I've played it mostly solo and a little bit co-op. How does it play in both of those modes? Let's find out and get to the list. So for my number 5, I'm going to focus on the combat system, because this is a game of different factions trying to control a board, and often that comes down to them battling each other. And I think this system is great. It is dice-based. You're rolling a 2d12s with values 0 through 3 on them, and that could put you off if you don't like randomness. But the nice thing is that, first of all, the higher die value is always used by the attacker, so it incentivizes attacking, and also you're never going to be too punished by attacking, generally speaking. But also it cuts off the amount of hits you can do based on the number of warriors you have there. So you have kind of like 2 mitigating factors, along with a lot of cards you can play. And there are these ambush cards that can totally destroy your plans and could be really frustrating, but those aren't used in solo and co-op. So I think if they were in there, I would actually like combat a little bit less, because I don't really like those take that card mechanics. But solo co-op, totally good. Well, my next one at number 4 is a mix. It kind of leans pro for me, but that's because of my personal taste. It might be a full-on con for some people, and that's the need to run the AI in solo and co-op. And in solo, I think it's really best when you have 2 or even 3 AI factions, but you need to first of all know how those factions work, kind of in the regular sense of the game, and then you additionally need to understand how they've been changed for the Automa, the Clockwork expansion, and running 2 or 3 of those, it can take up a lot of your time. You can spend way more time running the AI than you do actually making choices for yourself. Now again, for me, this is kind of a pro. I also like the coin games for this series, because I like and enjoy watching the AI kind of do their thing and being surprised by the moves they take, because the AI is kind of random, even though they have a fairly simple, straightforward flowchart for how you resolve their turn. So I don't think resolving the turns is tough, but some gamers are going to find it more like busy work, whereas if you're like me, you might actually find it an enjoyable aspect. But I'm back to a full-on pro with my number 3, which is the card play. I really like, first of all, the multi-use nature of the cards, because every card in your hand is generally potentially craftable for some kind of ongoing ability or one-time bonus, which is really cool because it amps up the variety of the factions. Even if you play the same faction, you might get some ongoing bonus cards to really change up the options available to you in your play. But I also really love and appreciate the tough choices with your cards, because most factions use them as a resource, and often you'll have to discard cards or trash them to gain some effect on the board, and making those tough choices, kind of figuring out where you want to focus, how they affect the layout of the map, and like which clearings you have a better chance of controlling. It's all fascinating and all plays really well. But for my number 2, I'm going down to a full-on con, my only one for the game, and it's really focused on solo and co-op play. I wouldn't have this for the competitive. And that's the fact that the game and the AI is very swingy. You can have a runaway leader problem. And here's the other kind of awkward thing that I'm going to lump into this point. And that's the fact that the Clockwork expansion, the one that was officially released, already has some issues with it. Like they had to do an errata for the Irie, one of the factions, because they just don't work as intended when you play by the rules as written. And then the person who designed that expansion is continuing to do their own like director's cut version on the Better Bot project, which is where it started. So that leaves players in this weird nebulous area where it's not entirely clear how you should play the solo mode. There are basically no suggestions over like which factions go well with others. And if you're willing to put in the time and play the game a bunch so that you can learn it, it's fine. But if not, it has such a barrier to entry in so many ways. But with all that being said, my number 1 is a big pro, and it is connected to some of those negatives in the number 2, and that's the fact that the factions are so varied, and that it is so much fun not just to play different factions and play around with their different tools, but to combo them with other factions. And solo allows that in a way that multiplayer would be much tougher, because you have to like teach everybody the factions over and over again. So I really love that. I love trying out new factions and seeing how they do against people. And even if there is a runaway leader problem, it's usually still fun to just like kind of strive and do my best, even if I don't win every time. So I think just exploring the factions and kind of having that sense of discovery each time and new strategies is always really cool. So overall, Root is kind of a weird one because, as I said, it is one of my top games, but do I recommend it to others for solo and co-op play? Maybe, because as I said, especially with my number 2 con, there are a lot of factors here that will make it tough for you to get into the game. Do you want to learn all the factions? Do you want to run all the factions, and is that fun for you? And are you willing to look online and find the errata and find the best version of the rules? Are you willing to kind of muddle through and just figure out, oh, maybe this faction doesn't really work well with that faction? All those things could be frustrating points for a gamer, and I think they're all magnified with co-op play where there's even less kind of guidance for you. But if you can get over that, the faction variety, the great card play and choices, just kind of the fun of exploring the game and trying to do your best against this insurmountable force is a ton of fun, at least for me, and could be amazing for you. And if you want to see a full solo play with me as some scrappy mice taking on 3 other giant factions, click the link that just popped up. Good gaming, and I'll see you at the next stop.